This is the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust. It's Wednesday, July 20, 2022 at 4 p.m. Our first order of business is a call to order by roll call. Linda Escobedo.
Present.
Mike Lawson.
Present.
Rich Feely.
Present.
Carrie LaFleur. Not yet, but we'll check back. And Keith Bergman present. So we have a quorum. Thanks everyone for being here with us. I should note that we first had posted this as a virtual meeting, then we had reposted it as a hybrid when the state authorization to hold virtual meetings was about to expire on July 15th, and then we reposted it when the acting governor, lieutenant governor, signed into law an extension on July 16th. So we will continue our remote meetings. Also wanted to note that I know Rich Feely needs to depart the meeting at 5 p.m. I don't have a hard stop, but I do have to go see Bob Gross talk about transcendentalists in their world at the Nantucket Athenaeum tonight. So we're looking forward to going there. We have a full agenda, and we're not going to be able to spend as much time as we need discussing everything. And I wanted to start off by saying that one of the items on our agenda, on our revised agenda, item 3D, resale of 100 Elmbrook Road, restricted condominium unit. We're going to reschedule that for a meeting where we're posted for executive session. So I'll be back with the trust members to schedule that. This was brought to us by Liz Russ. There is a 30-day notice that was triggered on July 15th. And so having a subsequent meeting will allow us to take care of that and advise on that. So the item number 2 is approval of minutes. And I did distribute to the trust members draft set of minutes from our June 29, 2022 meeting. So I would ask for, if there's no discussion, I'd ask for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Motion by Rich.
Second.
Second by Mike. Is there discussion?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
Thank you for doing these minutes.
Sure.
I would just want to note one important correction on page 3, paragraph 3, line 4, that starts with quick and swift on June 27th. Do you see that? Okay. The reference was not to Junction Village, but rather to an affordable housing development consultant that had been proposed earlier.
Oh, yes. Okay. I'll be happy to make that clarification. Let me calling up those minutes right now.
Okay.
And we'll make that amendment. Is there any further edits or amendments to the minutes? Okay, so could I accept that the mover and seconder of the motion accept the friendly amendment to add the word as amended to the motion?
Yep.
For the minutes. Okay.
A seconder, yes, too.
Okay. All right. So on the motion to approve the meeting minutes of June 29th, 2022 as amended, let's take a roll call. Linda?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Rich?
Aye.
Carrie is present?
Aye.
Aye. And Keith? Aye. So that's a 5-0 vote. Thanks all very much. Next is a status update on Christopher Heights Junction Village funding requirements. We have several items which I had placed on the right at the beginning of the agenda because they're brought to us by a regional housing service office director Liz Rust. I just want to recognize that we've got a bunch of other of our housing partners back with us today. This is actually the third meeting that we've had in recent weeks to talk about coordinating and strategizing about what our affordable housing strategy should be for funding for this new fiscal year. And in our previous discussions that we have sort of focused on what measures needed to be taken to allow the town to stay above 10% under the forthcoming 2020 US Census. So just briefly recap to say that Liz has some information here to about the 83 units at Christopher Heights, what options there are, some of which could lead to them being added to the subsidized housing inventory by next spring. You recall back on June 15th, we first learned at the Housing Production Plan Steering Committee that that the Junction Village Christopher Heights project might not be countable by the spring of 2023, which is the new target date for when the state's Department of Housing and Community Development is going to be releasing the denominator for calculating the 10% goal. It's subsidized housing inventory divided by the most recent US Census of year-round housing units. Well, the year-round housing units won't be known or released officially until May of 2023 by the US Census, and so DHCD is withholding updating the denominator until then. But even by that date, we were advised that the Christopher Heights might not be countable, which if so would cause the town of Concord to fall below its new 10% goal by some 8 to 20 units. So that's sort of what we've been talking about in recent weeks. It's greatly informed the joint meetings that we've had, the discussions on June 22nd and June 29th, and will again today. And we've looked at what could be done to stay above 10% by next spring, and had preliminary discussions about other potential alternatives. And we seem to be heading to an understanding that without Christopher Heights, that there was not a high level of surety that we could achieve staying above 10%. We've looked at preliminarily a number of other alternatives, even defined between 8 and 20 units, and recognized the great difficulty of pulling any of those sufficient number off. So what we've asked to do is to explore specifically what are the financial and legal hurdles that Christopher Heights faces, so that we could knowledgeably, not only the trust, but the housing partners in general, could knowledgeably engage the select board for their policy direction. And if required, what, if any, town meeting action might be required to let Christopher Heights be further considered. So with that opening, and I want to thank Liz for the work that she's done on all the items that she advises us on. And if you could just sort of walk us through the information you have about the status of Christopher Heights, and welcome.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Liz Rust here. So Lee Smith from the CHDC, and the CHDC, as you probably all know, is the property owner of the Junction Village site. Wrote a memo to Matt Johnson, copying Keith, and I think that you have that material in your packet, but maybe some of the people on this call don't have access to that information. So I'll just summarize and go through paragraph by paragraph, what it says, because I think it really provides all the pieces. This is a pretty complicated situation given the history and the various activities that have gone on. So this is a request to the select board to update the project. So earlier in the week, the CHGC has had conversations with the Grantham Group, Walter Ohanian, and really no real surprise, but many projects have fallen in the same situation of with the COVID increase or COVID-driven increases in construction and supply chain things. So DHCD has had a number of projects that were funded right before COVID can happen and have not been able to close on their funding because of increases in construction. So they have decided that they are going to ask all of those projects to reapply. They've established what they call a mini funding round for this summer mini funding round. And the process works that developers or projects would send a letter to DHCD tomorrow. And of all the letters they receive, 7 will be asked to or invited to apply. And of those 7, 5 will be awarded. So they will be asked to apply right away and 5 will be awarded. They'll be asked to apply by the end of September, and they'll be awarded in November. Some of the criteria includes that you've already been to DHCD. So this would be not the first time they've seen your project. And that you are able to close 3 months after the award. So you really have to have everything in hand in order to close. They, no more like we're just getting this one last permit or we're just getting these expenses. They really want to get this money out the door. Kate Racer, who's the associate director at DHCD, has offered to meet with the town to provide more information regarding the state's requirements and process, just because there might be some questions. DHCD has also made it clear that they will not be the sole funder of the COVID increases. So they are requiring municipalities or other funding sources to make up the COVID increase gap. In terms of what that is, Christopher Heights, the last budget that we were looking at in February 2020 was $20 million, give or take. It was a little bit under that, and it's $28 million today. So this is very current estimates. They have gone out and repriced everything with their experts who do that. And after exhausting all efforts to bridge the gap, they are still funding a gap of 1.3 million. So that's what's really coming before the town. This requirement for DHCD to assist in funding the increase. Their increase here is 8 million to assist in funding that. And it's a 1.3 in their budget. In looking at how to fund that or what the town could do, the one thing that came up as the best solution in terms of meeting the time frame was connecting to the municipal sewer system. So the project before had on-site, an on-site system. And even if the town chose to contribute this 1.3 million gap, would not be able to get the DEP approval to meet the 3-month closing for this summer round of funding. So so the time frame of being able to close within 3 months of award really dictates some of the actions that are available to the project in the town. So using sewer connection, so that's a 2-part request. One is for the town to I'm going to say authorize, I don't know if that's the right word, or to enable the project to connect. And the other is to request funds from the trust to actually build the connection, the construction, to do the construction to from the property to the actual sewer. There's a lot of, construction to do that. And that's contemplated to be around $800,000, which would include the sewer improvement fee. So that's the connection fee. So that's hard cash, as well as $300,000 to do the construction, all of which would need to be, kind of fine-tuned. Like, should everyone, the town and the trust, agree to go forward, those numbers would be tightened up a little bit. But this all has happened in the last week. So let me just see that this, so that would alleviate 1.3 million for the what's in the budget now to actually build a sewer in the construction budget. So that it's anticipated that would beat, alleviate the gap. From the number of units and SHI, Keith did a nice job of summarizing that. This creates 83 SHI eligible units for the town. It is the only viable way to not only stay above 10% or to get above 10% in this time frame, but really in the near term. If the project did not go forward, it would take many years to actually create this number of units. So the town would be under 10% for some period of time. So I know that sometimes there's a little gap for the 10%. That was the case in the last census period with that was Alexan Concord, it was called at the time, Concord Muse, and now it's the Prescott, right? It's gone through a few different names. But there was a time there where Concord dipped below 10% until all the building permits were issued. In this case, if the project didn't go forward, again, it would take some period of time. Without the town's additional support is now required, the project probably will likely not be built. I think that's the way the developer feels. That's the message that they're getting from DHCD. And we say, well, likely, you never know. Yeah. So the town has sort of three options. Not even sort of, the town has three options as we've laid them out. There might be others, but provide the funding and the municipal support in accordance with the summer funding timetable. That's what we mentioned about connecting to the sewer and providing the sewer improvement fee and the construction. And this would, and even with that, don't know that DHCD would fund them, but it would certainly bridge the gap and provide a tight timetable, but a timetable to meet. Provide funding for a later DHCD round. Could say we're not able to make the commitments right now, but we still want to, plug in with the project and we'll do it later. I don't know, later this year, some other time. Grantham could apply for a later funding round. Those usually come up in February for applying in November. Much bigger round. Then you're with all the new projects and, how competitive are you? And you're still at a funding gap. So you're still required to you as the developer present a balanced budget. So, and you would be below 10, Concord would be below 10% during that period of time, or the town could decline any further support. So I don't think the project would go forward in that case. And should the project terminate, I think everyone knows, right? Many people here I've worked with for many years now, more than 10 years of work by the town committees, boards and staff. Probably, I don't know, $150,000 of pre-development money has gone into this, the open space park work. And it would take many years before another affordable housing project would be considered and progress to this same point. Maybe not 10 years, because 10 years is pretty long, but it would still take some time. These projects of this size take quite. But points to consider, even with the increased project cost, Christopher Heights has a $388,400 total per unit development cost, and $48,000 per unit of Concord funds, including the present request. So this has always been presented with the project. No other local project has that per loa subsidy. As everyone's aware, the previously proposed Giroux land project had a unit cost of $750,000. So this is half of that. And that's part of what makes it attractive to DHCD, because it brings the per unit cost down. So when they look at their per unit cost across projects, this helps them in that calculation. The Assabet River Bluff project has $200,000 per unit just for the land. And then with expected future request. So it stacks up pretty well on that level. CHDC is well aware that the town, CHDC and Grantham signed an MOU in 2017 in which the developer agreed not to request any additional financial support from the town. And that's very strong. This request comes from DHCD, and if the funds are used for a town sewer connection, they would in part be going back to the town through the sewer connection. The funds wouldn't be applied to the project. The funds would be applied directly to the town and, you know, the construction of the sewer. So it's a service providing to the town, but that I can appreciate that that might be considered a nuance and not in the spirit of the MOU, but there's some technical accuracy to that. And the notice of funding availability, that's the technical term for this summer round, requires the developer submit a letter of interest tomorrow. And DHCD, I went through this, right? Invite 7 people and this, so there's a draft letter that they're sending. The select board will be hearing this on Monday night, but it's very quick action. And I understand the complexity of making this kind of commitment. And it would need to be, what they will need is the sewer permit in hand by mid-September. So it's more than just, aside from the funds from the trust, it's an actual permit. So, you know, so there's some work to really, like, even if the town is inclined to say yes, to actually make that happen in order to apply. The letter of intent does not need to have the commitment for the additional local funds or support, but must indicate a positive willingness to work towards a firm commitment by 9:30, and then a draft letter was attached. So I think that that really hits the main points of the consideration, and I'll just leave it at that and open it up for questions and discussion. I guess I would say one other thing. So Marcia's here on the call. So that this, there was a discussion with Alan Cathcart about this issue probably a month ago now. So I know it's being looked at, but I don't know with the same urgency that has come up here with this DHCD round, probably not with that same urgency. So further work and discussion and support from his department in terms of capacity and the logistics of connecting needs to be done.
Thanks, Liz. Any further comments, Marcia, that, or anything that you wanted to add about this?
No, just that we are engaged in that conversation, and I will be reaching out to Alan over the next couple of days so that we have information in time for the select board meeting on Monday night. I don't have it for you today. I wish I did, but.
Okay. Thank you. And I think I accurately recall from Marcia, we heard Liz indicate that there's one project that we can advance to stay above 10%. And I just wanted to, and I think I heard you concur with that.
I do concur.
Okay. Yeah, I specifically recall you're saying I should have asked that question 2 years ago, and you're not wrong. So thank you. Except I wasn't here then, but so all right. So I'll open it up first to the members of the trust for any questions or comments that they may have. Mike, did you have a question?
Yeah, I have a couple. First, Liz, hi. You made mention of the DHCD's requirements that the towns come up with additional funding. Is that in writing somewhere?
No, it's not in writing, and it was I think they were a little vague about how they put that, but perhaps a discussion with Kate Racer can clarify that with her directly, and she did offer to talk to the town.
I'm just curious if it's a requirement, why they're not willing to write it down, and if it's not written down, what's the real point here? That's one question.
Yeah. Could I ask a practical question? Is there an upper dollar limit of what DHCD has said it would make available to an applicant in this round?
Yes, let me get that while you get more questions. Let me get the funding application and look at that specifically.
Okay, thanks. More questions, Mike, and then I'll call on.
I just had one addressed to Carrie, I guess. Forgetting the practicality of it, but or any willingness to do it, but could ARPA funds be used to support the sewer project?
Yes, we have talked about the use of ARPA funds for sewer connection fees. I haven't made any decision about that, but it definitely would be eligible under that grant program.
Thanks for the question and the answer. So that would seem to indicate that there are perhaps at least two potential funding sources if the town, if I would dare say, if the select board were to support a town contribution, that there are two ready fund sources, one of which is this trust and the other is ARPA funding to some degree. So thanks for that. Rich, you have your hand up, and then Carrie.
Yeah, Liz, great presentation. To me, it's a no-brainer to do this. We've had an act of God, or at least of viral infected bats and Russian dictators, that mean that this is a totally different situation than 3 years ago. Secondly, on a cost per unit basis to the town, this is a fraction of what we're looking at in any other units we're trying to develop at the moment. And thirdly, it targets a group that we know are already in this town, many of them. We've seen the numbers on elderly and the percentage of elderly that are living on low incomes. And we're all going to get there eventually. So it meets a need. And finally, if we have a 40B, you're going to have a bunch more kids in the schools and other burdens on the taxes. So to me, coming up with 800 or $1 million through some combination of the trust and ARPA is the smartest thing we could do now. I know there's a history, but history is discontinuous.
Thanks, Mike. Carrie?
So I have a question and a comment or two. My question is, I'm not sure if I missed this, but the gap is 1.3, but it looks like the request is for 800,000. So how did we come up with 800,000? Why isn't it 50-50? And is the developer then going to come up with the rest of the gap?
So the 1.3 reflects the cost of building the on-site septic. Or the on-site wastewater. So if this was the direction, a 1.3 would come out of the budget, essentially, because they wouldn't need to build the on-site. And really, in their budget, they wouldn't put any of this cost because they don't reflect this as money coming into the project. This is, the town providing the connection to the sewer. Right, so this money would be outside the project. It wouldn't flow to the developer. It wouldn't be in the developer budget. So 1.3 comes out and nothing else has to go in.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And Keith, do you want to take comments now or just questions?
I'm sorry, Carrie?
Do you want to take comments now or are you just taking questions?
Oh, comments are fine.
So Liz and I had the opportunity to discuss this yesterday, and my immediate reaction was, how do you say no? But saying yes is very, very difficult. So obviously saying no, it would be hard to say no for all of the reasons that Rich already explained. It's a needed project. The cost per unit is very favorable in comparison to some of the other projects we've looked at. But the community has spoken many times and loudly about the town's contribution. So it makes it a very difficult decision to weigh. That said, I have had past experience in other communities where you have a 40B project come in and it gets denied and it goes up to the Housing Appeals Court, and that group can award sewer connection fees or eliminate the sewer connection fees. I've seen that happen. And so we could be in a position, if we turn this project down and have another 40B come in, where we're forced to waive those connection fees. And so I think that's something that we have to consider as well.
Thanks for that comment, Carrie. And I know I've stated at past meetings that my own experience when I was town administrator in Littleton, that that community went through the wrenching experience of an unfriendly 40B. The good news was that the town reached 10% and has stayed above 10% since then. The bad news was that it really was a wrenching experience, and the town vowed that they never wanted to have that happen again. And so they've been so that the strategy was to be proactive to make sure enough units get built so that it does not happen again. So there really is a no action alternative here, which, you know, at some level saves the town any additional public funds, because the developer is going to do what he wants at a location that may not be where the town wants it, whatever neighborhood it might be, and we're all just trying to share information now so that if we were to fall below 10% in the future, that there won't be any finger pointing to say, why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you share with us what we could have done to avoid it? And that's really what we're doing. I think there's a policy decision to be made. I think it needs to be made by the select board. They get to make it. And we want to make sure we have the information to provide to them. Diane Proctor, I'll call on. Oh, I'm sorry, Linda, and then Diane. Thank you.
So I see that I hear how short the timeline is here, and all the conversations that have already preceded this today. And I see the draft of the letter that would go to Catherine Racer for this. I guess a couple questions. One is, in the per unit cost that's been generated, does that include the value of the town's subsidy for TIF that also benefits this project? And the reason I'm asking that is for two reasons. Should we decide to go ahead, the select board to go ahead and support this, it's another substantial line item in terms of showing the support for this project. And it also theoretically should affect the per unit cost. So those are
The per unit cost is a development cost only, and the TIF is really ongoing operations. It's the property taxes ongoing.
But my understanding was that subsidy level is factored into the one-stop pro forma.
The one-stop has two sections, the development cost. This is only the actual construction development costs. So no.
Okay, no for the per unit cost, I hear that. But in terms of quantifying or estimating for the 15-year period that is included in the TIF, which also has a ceiling of no more than 2 million assessment. So there are some actual numbers that can be,
Included, yes.
included, would show a substantial number in terms of town support. I'm just trying to strengthen the argument here, should it go forward.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I'd agree with Linda. It ought to strengthen, mentioning the value of the TIF ought to strengthen the how DHCD views the town's commitment, because there's a lot of money, even if it's money that was deferred and was through a TIF program, but nevertheless, it expresses the support that the town has given the project. Other questions initially from the trust members? Okay, let me go then to Diane and then Chris.
I have just a quick question, Keith, and it's stimulated by Rich's comment. I have understood that the Concord citizens would not necessarily have first access to these available places. He speaks of an aging population here. What are the rules? Have they changed? And what would that mean in terms of Concordians being able to count on this as a place for them to be able to get the support they need? Thank you.
Nothing to do with occupancy regulations and the ability to have a local preference. None of that is changed. That's pretty firm from DHCD. That's another set of guidelines. This is really just on the money. So none of that has changed. So there will be a local preference on initial leasing. And then, as has been the experience of Concord Park and others, that the wait lists are move very quickly, so that there's never really been a big backup, if you will, of local people looking, but there's not a designated local preference past initial leasing. And that's true of all funded projects from the state, and as well as all regulated projects. So everything on the SHI would work in that same manner.
Thank you, Liz. I just thought it was important to hear that again. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up, Diane. I know that's a big topic.
Thanks, Diane. Chris and then Terry.
Thanks, Keith. Two questions. Liz, you talked about there being an $8 million gap in the, I guess, the construction cost or the project budget versus when this was originally considered several years ago. So how does that $8 million gap get solved?
So it's an $8 million increase in construction. So the state has made state ARPA funds available up for a maximum of $7 million per project. So they put together here up to the maximum of 7 million, and then they have increased some of their low-income housing tax credit and a little bit of some other piece to make up the other million.
Okay, and that's the application that you were speaking of? Is that how they can get, or is this something on top of that
No.
you're talking about the application?
Nope, this is what they call their one-stop or their project budget that they prepared, which has both the revenue side, the sources, and they really needed it for the uses, the expenses side, so they could understand, you know, what their project looked like. So when they went out to, they don't go out to bid, but when they went out for revised estimates, they did both sides of the equation. And that's what they'll use to apply for DHCD should they be given the opportunity over the summer.
Okay, and that application to DHCD is what puts them in line for the ARPA money? Or are those?
Yes, that's correct.
It
That's
is,
correct.
okay.
So they will fund 5 projects with whatever their ARPA fund budget is for this.
Okay, thank you. My second question is around what the town has already committed. In other words, what's sunk cost on this? So if we were to abandon, what money is left on the table? What money are we out essentially?
Yeah, so I said verbally that it was around $150,000. Let me look up that exactly, but it's something like that. Over the years, there have been various CPA funds that have been appropriated for this. Let me get that for you, but it's around there. It's between $100,000 and $200,000, but I can get that more specific.
But the majority of the funding that was promised to the project from the town would just be returned.
Of course, that hasn't gone out the door at all. That's just sitting there. So that's $2 million of town funds, as well as a commitment of $650,000 of home consortium money, which doesn't flow into the town, but it's town directed nonetheless. But that money is just sitting there waiting. Exactly, Mike.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And then Liz, I would guess that additional legal fees that were involved in this as well.
Well, that would be all in that one number that came out of the previously the pre-development funds from CPA. So any outside expenses. So yeah. It'll just take me a minute to get that.
Thanks. Terry and then Stefan.
Thanks, Keith. My question is, you mentioned a few times that the select board will be involved. It's a policy decision. I think you're coming this Monday to the select board meeting. And my question is whether you're going to be looking for some kind of a vote this Monday, or is this a preliminary discussion because the grant application isn't going in until September? And yet you're sending in a letter tomorrow. So I'm just confused on the timetable.
Right, well, so the developer's sending it in, right? So it's not, this is the CHDC that's kind of facilitating this. I think the developer wants to get a strong feeling that the gap will be supported. I think whether it's a vote that's the sense of the board, if the board could vote, yes, if we can make this happen, we're so inclined to, like that would go a long way. Or what would it take, when could, because what is needed by the middle of September is the actual permit. So I'm not sure about the details of how you get an actual permit, like what you actually have to do to get that permit issued, but I'm imagining there's some things that you have to do that will take some time. So the sooner the select board gives the green light to go forward in that way, the more chances are that that's actually going to be able to happen. If the select board says we need to talk about this another time or 2 more times, or whatever process that you feel is the process that would work the best, what information you would need, I think that you would identify that, and Lee Smith will be there to present, and I'll support him, and Marcia will be there, and I think Keith is going to come, and we'll all be there for you. And you would outline what path that you would need to take to come to a definitive response. I do think that the developer will want to know next week whether this is continuing to move forward in the town, or whether it's just really a no, or non-starter, or no action, or whatever the right term is for that.
Thank you for that. And I anticipate we would probably have questions also for Alan Cathcart. So he hopefully will be at the meeting.
Yes, as Marcia said, she's going to be in touch with him, and I think that that's important as well. Yes, I agree.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. Stefan.
Yeah, the last updates before this new DHCD funding availability indicated that the key sticking point was the need for a bridge loan. Does the addition, 2 questions. Number 1, does that still exist somehow, or does the repricing of the project and the additional 7 million from DHCD makes the need for the bridge loan go away? That's my first question.
That's correct. The bridge loan is no longer a strategy that's being pursued.
Okay, and so that the tax credit issues have also been resolved, or won't spring forth again with because I think that wasn't that part of driving the equation of what was needed for the bridge loan?
Well, I think it was more money into the project. So now the project's been repriced, DHCD has offered this as a path. So this is the strategy now.
Okay. Then one question and one other point. I wanted to add a quick point to Frank's long list of reasons that it makes sense to go ahead. And that is that there is no other allowed use for that land than affordable housing because of the restrictions on how we acquired it from the Department of Corrections, if I'm not mistaken, or open space.
Also, it can also be used for open space.
Or open space, okay, but we need housing. And then my other question is, in the resizing of the cost of the project, how does that affect the developer's fees and profit and all that sort of stuff? Does that go up by 1/3 roughly as well, or do those numbers stay fixed based on the earlier?
I believe that those numbers are fixed. I can go back and look, and they have deferred their overhead and their expenses till the project is occupied. So they've moved collecting their fee way out as well as their contribution to the project.
That had been done before, right, Liz?
No, that was, well, since like in the last year, that was part of
Yeah.
one of the pieces that they put in place within the last year.
I think if that is a development, not development, if that is a circumstance that changed since the 2017 no more town funding
Mhm.
request, I think it's worth pointing that out, that the developer is giving and has given something as well. So it's not only the town, and it's not only the town plus DHCD that's putting up more money.
That's correct.
I think
Thank you. That's a good point.
helpful.
Thank you very much. Could say that there was, back to this, sorry, it took me a little while. There was a $200,000 appropriated for pre-development, of which 136,000, give or take, has been spent. So that would be the sunk cost, aside from, unless you want to count per hour spent by town staff. Just joking. But that includes the open space Junction Village time. You know, they had the landscape architect and stuff that was most recent.
Liz, if you could help with identifying what is the additional amount of state funding that Grantham Group is asking for?
Okay. You mean like, right? Let me just see if I already have that. I did a little math. Let me just see. Okay.
I couldn't specifically find it in the package, although,
There's a lot of numbers and I did not put that.
yeah,
in it.
I was trying to put two numbers together. One is the $800,000 being
Yeah.
requested and from town resources, and a $1.3 million funding gap. And didn't
Okay,
know
so
if they might
there's,
be asking.
I'm just gonna
for-
rattle off some numbers.
Yeah.
The permanent loan actually went down by $1.2 million. The tax credit, the federal tax credit equity went up by 2.1. The ARPA funds, as I mentioned, went up by 7 million. That's gonna be most of it. The West Metro Home Consortium, as I mentioned, the town upped their contribution by $170,000. And again, those aren't really town funds, but town directed. DHCD home funds are no longer part of this funding round, so that was a minus of 825. And the deferred developer fee was $900,000.
Okay, so I guess I'm just trying to get my head around what, if there's a way for us to consider what our $800,000 in additional town funds would be compared against. What's the net? What's the increase in state funds that's being tapped into as a result of
Well,
this?
very significantly, right, the $7 million of ARPA funds.
ARPA funds.
Yeah, I mean, that's the
So
big
that's,
chunk there.
a big one. So
Yep,
if the
and the
question
tax
was-
credit, the low-income housing tax credit for 2.1. So those are your big numbers.
Okay. All right, so we could view the $800,000, the additional investment in from town resources as being the means by which the developer can access those rather large amounts,
Mhm.
millions, in order for the project to proceed. And that does it. That ties together all the funding that's needed to go forward. Is that correct?
That's the presumption that it makes
Yeah.
the project, it eliminates the gap and makes it competitive to be invited to apply.
Okay,
And it's, again, funds aren't coming into the project, but what the town and the funds would do would be deliver sewer to the project.
Right.
So it's not delivering money, but it's delivering sewer, which is kind of money. It's like liquid gold, right? Whatever. But it's a little bit different though, in terms of the accounting and how the budgets look and how the numbers are done. But it's a detail, but it's different in terms of that. Like the town wouldn't be, a lender to the project for these extra funds, right?
Very good. Thank you. Rich, and I know you're at your.
Yeah, I'm going to propose a way forward here in the form of a motion, but I defer to you. I would move that the trust determine that the highest and best use of unobligated funds is to assist the town in such sewer activities as are necessary to make Junction Village feasible. I'm stating that as essentially a priority for use of trust funds because I realize the select board's got to weigh in. But I think we ought to be clear, and it's just crystal clear to me, that the kinds of per unit additional costs that Liz are talking about are a fraction of what it's going to cost us to get anything else, in addition to giving us the only chance of avoiding 40B. So again, the motion is to move that the highest, the priority use of trust funds that are currently unobligated is to assist in providing sewer service to Junction Village such that the project can proceed.
I'm just writing that down. Is there a second for that?
It's not.
I'll second it.
Okay, so second by Carrie. And is there discussion? And I'll start because what I had hoped to do is to, in kind of framing what the trust might do, is the following: that it's very important that any, the significant use of trust funds reflect the policy direction of the town, right? And that and since there's been discussion, there's about a memorandum of understanding which has certain requirements or limits on the developer, perhaps in asking for money. I'm unclear if it has any limits on the trust or the select board in providing either the trust from our trust fund or the select board from ARPA for providing funds. But in any event, that determination I would submit is above our pay grade. It's above the trust pay grade, and it's a policy decision that would need to come from the select board. So I think that what we might want to do is somehow reference that any use of trust fund and such use of trust funds would be subject to the select board's policy direction. And should the select board so determine, the further approval of town meeting. And I am not saying that this needs to go to town meeting. What I'm saying is it's not our call, whether it is, I would dare say it's the select board's policy decision on whether their hands are tied and thus ours, or whether the authority exists without going back to town meeting to have this go forward. And I don't know what the timing is about, I hear there's a town meeting this fall. I don't know if there's any way, if the determination by the selectmen were made that what, we do have to go and, undo or amend some prior vote which restricted the funds that can be used, then if so, fine, go to town meeting and do it. If not, make the determination that no further town meeting action is necessary for whatever reason. All of that, though, is the select board's determination and not ours. But I think that we need to respect the fact that there's disagreement in the community about whether there are binding, there exist legal impediments to us voting these funds. If,
Well, that's why I phrased it the way I did,
Yeah.
Keith. As I said, the highest priority
right,
use of unobligated funds. If the town won't go ahead, obviously, we're not going to do it.
right,
But I want to be clear that we will, we will help fund this if the town permits it to go ahead. And I would hope that we don't have to go to a town meeting, but if we do, we do.
right, right. And I guess what I'm saying, I'm agreeing with Rich's motion as it's made, but I would suggest that we add the further conditions that I mentioned of that it's subject, that any use of the trust funds for that purpose is subject to the select board's policy direction, and should the select board so determine, the further approval of town meeting. That I think does a couple of things. It lets us express to the select board the sentiment that if you want to do this, we're ready. We're ready to support you. But if you don't want to do it, you get to decide that. You get to decide that this project doesn't proceed. So that's sort of where I'm coming from.
The
Mike?
only comment I would have, Keith, is I would keep it with a subject to the select board's policy direction. If the select board says we have to go to town meeting, okay, but I'd love it if the select board would do it without going to town meeting, and I wouldn't want to raise it. But I agree with you on the first clause. Sorry.
Thanks, Rich. Mike, I saw your hand.
Yeah. Well, I think your suggested amendment is very important. This is, I think, something the select board has to discuss. They've got to discuss whether to go forward with it. And second, they need to figure out whether they would want to use trust funds or ARPA funds, whichever seem to be best in their judgment. But without the amending language that made it clear that our support is conditioned upon the approval of the select board, I can't support the motion.
Yeah,
I accept the friendly amendment.
thank you. Terry.
I'm not sure, I don't have the trust charge in front of me, but I'm not sure if funds from the trust are allowed to fund only direct funds for housing, or can they fund things such as sewer connections and sewer construction? And if so, we might be setting a precedent for future uses of the trust fund. So those are some questions that I have.
Yeah,
I'm gonna, a very small but similar precedent was for the 930 Main Street for the CHDC, and they used CPA funds to fund connecting that house to the sewer.
Right, but I'm wondering in the Municipal Affordable Housing Trust, what are our legal limitations about exactly what the funds can be spent on?
So that's a good question. And I think development costs would, cover this whole area.
Sure.
Yeah, it's an
Okay.
excellent question. I do think that any of the costs that that the development would incur in order to get built are for this affordable housing project are eligible uses. And frankly, what I know what we're going to see in the among things that we will see in the housing production plan update is sort of a flagging of the importance of sewer capacity, sewer extension, wastewater disposal ability as being a critical factor in being able to pursue affordable housing in Concord. So it's a great question, and I would say that it's certainly an eligible expense.
So Keith, if I may.
Yes.
So I do, thanks, Rich, for the accepting the friendly amendment. And I do think allowing the select board to set policy direction, including source of funds, is important.
Yeah, and I guess what I'd and I'm wondering if we wanted to, since the motion refers to use of trust funds, is there anything that we would we want to get into the business of recommending if the board wanted to support the additional funding for the project, would we want to somehow frame that as, if you want to do trust funds, you can, or that we would support either the use of trust funds if the select board approved, or we'd support the use of ARPA funds if that was what they wish to do. Should we raise that issue at all, or can that be raised maybe by CHDC?
Well, I think that it depends. The trust might have other plans for its funds, which might bear consideration in that question.
Yeah, well, I guess what I'm trying to say is that after we contribute to the Assabet Valley purchase, there is, this is, to me, the highest priority use of trust funds. There's no other way we're going to get, approximately 100 affordable units in my lifetime. And, I think by saying it's our highest priority, and with the friendly amendment, I think we're basically saying, yeah, we defer to the select board, but we think this is the most important thing that can be done for affordable housing. Keith, I've really got to go. Do you think?
Okay, yeah, I'm going to if I'm going to call a vote, although I'm going to recite or reiterate the motion that's on the table. It's a motion by Rich Feely that the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust, well, see if you'll accept it in this form, that the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust expresses its support for Grantham Group's request to the state's Department of Housing and Community Development for additional state funding for the Christopher Heights Junction Village project, and further to express to the select board that the highest priority for use of trust funds would be for to provide Junction to provide this project with to cover the sewer expenses. I'm reading my own notes. Subject to the select board's policy direction, and should the select board so determine, the further approval of town meeting.
I defer to Mike, but I'd like to leave town meeting out of it. Seems to me the select board can say we got to go to town meeting, and that's what happens.
I agree.
Okay.
And I think as much as I hear the sentiment that Rich is trying to promote here and don't disagree with, I do want to leave it open to the select board's determination for source of funds. And by saying that the trust's highest priority somehow doesn't do that for me.
Well, I mean, obviously, if the town can use ARPA or wave a magic wand, they don't need our money, that's fine. I mean, we can't say, do the deal, submit the application. I think
But we can, Yeah,
This is what we want to do with our money if you go ahead with it.
or we can say that we feel that, select board policy direction and funding for this project is of the highest priority for building affordable housing units at this time, something like that.
Well, as long as we're clear that we think this is the most important use of our funds at this time, unobligated funds at this time, I'm comfortable with, whatever else we need to say. And I certainly understand the deference to the select board.
I'm drafting some compromise language here, best use of. Let's see, I'm thinking along the lines of, and to express to the select board that the trust views this project as the highest and best use of town funds for affordable housing.
Okay,
What about, does that say it?
that's okay, yeah. I mean, we can't say what the town should do, but we have a say on, that the trust, maybe you have, the trust thinks it's the highest and best use of unobligated trust funds or other affordable housing funds available to the town.
Yeah.
That,
I think the language you have, Keith, probably does it. And we have two members of the select board right here. I don't think there'd be much confusion as to
okay,
our intent.
And we'll, all right, so I think we have a motion then, and I know we're about to lose one member, so let's have a roll call vote on the motion as amended. Linda,
Right?
Mike,
Aye.
Rich,
I,
Carrie,
I,
and Keith, aye. Thank you very much. Well, I got to tell you, I achieved the number one item on my list of things to do today by having a unanimous vote from this board that we can communicate to the select board. So thank you all very much for taking the time to go through this.
sorry to leave, but thanks, Keith.
Okay, thank you. Thanks so much, Rich. All right, time check. It's 5:08. And we've got a few other items to go through, and I'm going to stick with and I want to thank our housing partners that are here and for your patience. I think one of the most important things we were hoping to address, we've just spent a lot of time on, and I do want to continue our discussion as much as we can today. So item 3B is Assabet River Bluff closing. And for that, the information that was shared with the committee chairs this morning is that August 8th is now the closing date, Liz, for
That's correct.
for that. So that's great to hear. The trust had voted on June 29th to approve the form of a mortgage and promissory note, and subject to approval as to town council as to form. So I'm not aware that there are any tweaks or edits that were necessary to that document. So it should be all set to go forward. So thanks very much. Minuteman National Park Affordable Rental Opportunity 3C. This, we did receive an update from Liz Rust, a memo describing steps we might want to take where the Minuteman National Park would apparently be agreeable to entering into an agreement with the town or the trust for leasing certain residential properties that they've been renovating or will be renovating, which we could operate as, which the town could operate as affordable units. Liz, maybe just a quick summary of how that might work for the benefit of folks on the call.
Sure. Let me just pull that up. So this kind of thing would be best accomplished through the trust establishing a rental assistance program for this purpose. This would not provide a deed restriction on the property, but it would provide the funds to subsidize an amount to the eligible persons who are renting. So this is not going to create SHI eligible units, but it would assist people in living in those homes. So I think that, let me just see. So I think that the arrangement is that the town would lease the property from the national parks, right? And then sublease it to the eligible tenant. So that's a little complexity there. So I had sort of 5 steps, sort of simply put, was to determine, who would be eligible for your program, like who are you trying to do? And then, not to do, I'm sorry, who would you try to assist in this? Determine how much money, what rental subsidy amount. You could do flat amounts. You could be related to the affordability, the income of the actual person. Utilities are a big factor here because the cost of heating these older properties is quite high. Determining the procurement process for the town or the trust to lease the home and the other costs. So, putting, is it the town or is it the trust, right? So you got to sort of sort that out. And then, exactly how, who is actually going to be the landlord here and who's going to be the tenant, and how to really do that from a procurement process. Determining the tenant selection process, right? Like, how you're going to take applications, do a lottery. Presumably you're doing it just for this unit. Maybe it's just a first come, first serve. You just put it out on some listing service, but there's some determination there. And then draft the program requirements, the participation agreements and the sublease and the other pieces there. So a lot of discussions and like next level of detail if you wanted to go there to define the program, and we can make some recommendations for all of those points, but just at this level, those are the basic steps forward.
Thanks very much, Liz, for putting that together. Mike, you have your hand up.
Just a quick question to Liz. Liz, I think when we looked at the properties or we were in conversation, you'd mentioned that these kind of agreements, rental assistance programs exist.
Yes.
And I was hoping maybe you could send along a couple of them so that we could sort of review them and maybe start trying to draft one of our own.
Sure. So we have, the RHSO administers a number of rental assistance programs, and the agreements are between, and this would be a little bit different, but the agreements that we use that were developed with town council and such are between the landlord, the tenant, and the subsidizing agency, be the town. So here, I think it's really just going to be between, I don't know, is it the town or the trust, right? So I haven't really, sure about how the program would work from that side, but I'm glad to send, that's a participation agreement. That's relatively easy to put together. I think some of the other pieces are a little harder to put together, but yeah, I'm glad to send that along.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks very much. Any other questions or comments on this? Thanks, Liz, for putting that update together. I mentioned earlier, item 3D, 100 Elmbrook will be scheduled for a later meeting. Item 3E, a local initiative program, LIP application protocol. I put this on just as an FYI that the DHCD has a local initiative program that by which affordable units get counted outside of a comprehensive permit issued by a zoning board of appeals under Chapter 40B. And that process specifically refers to a local housing partnership as being a local entity with whom DHCD refers matters. And Liz's question, good one, did the trust want to play a role, play that role in the LIP process? And so I wanted to bring it to our attention. I think that the issue may be, though, that since the Affordable Housing Trust is not also defined as a local housing partnership, we may not be able to play that role, even if we were inclined to, unless that title were specifically bestowed upon us. And if there's need at the local level for input that isn't happening now, does the absence of a local housing partnership mean that there is not some level of input that Concord would like to have? Then maybe we could explore whether how the local housing partnership role under the LIP program would be played, and whether we would want to do that or not. So I'm not looking for the decision today, but I just want, since the question had been raised and it's a good one, that I just wanted to put it out there so there can be some further discussion on it. I think it ultimately may be something we want to review and make a policy recommendation to the select board for whatever appropriate action is required.
So in my experience, towns that have no partnership but a trust, the trust often plays this role, and the role isn't, I mean, it's signing the application, but it also is an opportunity for that group to review the projects with respect to the affordable units that are being built by private developers, and to sign on that. And so it's not required by DHCD. So if it's just the select board that signs, that's totally okay. So it's really a preference on whether, the town or you think that it's useful for you to see the details of the affordable units being created in the town. And this came up, I just want to say this came up because we're preparing the application for the Mill Run development, and there are 2 restricted units in there. So just trying to look ahead at the process, what kind of process would.
Right, and ultimately the select board is the local signatory on, or is the local actor. Board of Selectmen the select board must approve a LIP application.
Mhm.
And so the question comes, what role can we play informally, formally, to provide our input to the select board? And so I'm sure we'd be happy to be briefed on the specifics of any housing project in the meantime, but it may not be in an official capacity. But
in the past, the CHDC used to sign as the local housing group. So but so it's really up to whatever the town wants to do.
Yeah. We can you had talked last time about a housing roundtable meeting at some point in the future, and maybe this matter, along with many other things, could come for discussion in that forum. So thanks for all of these items that you brought us, Liz, and for all the work that you're doing on affordable housing here and on so many of our neighboring communities. So thanks so much. Now we are finally, I would say, reaching the agenda item where we're meeting again with our fellow housing entities to discuss our funding priorities for the coming year. And thank you for your patience. And I wanted to, is Rick Eifler on the call? Rick had shared with us some information, a preliminary list of Concord Housing Authority SHI potential units. There's Rick, and And so this would be an opportunity just to talk about those, or if you wish, or for any of our participants to bring up matters that we haven't discussed yet. So thanks, Rick.
Sure, yeah, if anybody's interested, I have that document. I could share it with you guys if there's interest. But the meeting, meeting's going pretty long. If you want to move ahead, that's fine too. You could save it for some other meeting.
We seem to be getting together an awful lot at a lot of meetings, and I appreciate the effort to put the list together. I know we did distribute it to our distribution list beforehand, and
So I have a suggestion.
yeah.
There's an upcoming housing production plan meeting, is there not?
Yes, on the 27th.
Next week.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and-
next Wednesday. Yeah.
So will this also be discussed there?
No, that meeting is really going to be,
Okay,
it could be, but not at this. It's a little bit higher level. It's a little bit
Okay.
broader goals and strategies.
okay. Then I think it would be helpful to hear this.
I could go through it quickly if you could.
Sure.
You want to make me able to share, or do you want to share it?
Yeah, I think you might be able to share it. I think we're hostless.
Okay, let's see.
Yeah.
Boom. It's going to show the agenda first, but then I'll switch it to, yeah, so can everybody see that?
Yes,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay, so what I did was I just took a list that includes properties that were mentioned on the League of Women Voter correspondences over the last few years, couple years. And I also added a few of our own that have been considered as having potential in one way or another, just to kind of get any property that might be up for discussion on this list. And this is really, I should point out, my analysis, just kind of because I've been involved in a lot of these things. I would just thought I ought to recap it because I get asked about it a lot. So the biggest project on this list is 399 to 401 Bedford Street, which has 8 SHI units. It's really attached townhouses, basically. And I did want to point out to everyone that although we've talked about this project having potential to add units, it does have a deed restriction when it was originally transferred to the Housing Authority that limits it to 8 units. So that would have to be, obstacle would have to be overcome. It did go through, as far as I could tell, I didn't read the 40B approval from long ago, but it looked like it was a substantially thick document. And there may be some hurdles getting that changed. I don't quite know how that works. And there's also the issue of town sewer capacity to accept this project onto their sewer on that Bedford Street. So we have some funds coming up. We thought they were coming up this year to study the feasibility of connecting to town sewer. Turns out those funds were kind of delayed by DHCD for more important things. So we might see those funds next year. But that feasibility could be studied if anybody was interested in that. Let's see, 405 Bedford Street is the little house that sits right adjacent. Oh, actually, you drive by it on the driveway in. So we own that house. It's just a house, but it does have a backyard septic system. And if that project were connected at the same time, there is some potential that something could be added in the backyard, either one or possibly a duplex. If the septic system was moved and was also connected to town sewer. So there's a potential study there, but it's not imminent that we're going to gain any units. There's the unit we're trying to build in Commonwealth Avenue, and I'm happy to update that with everybody, but it's basically going through a redesign to avoid a deed restriction that limits it to public housing. The current plan is to give to sell the development rights to Habitat for Humanity, which is not a public entity. So the public housing restriction on the original 365 Commonwealth property means that we have to redesign the project so that the house footprint sits only on the portion of the property that the town donated from the Giroux parcel. If anybody's interested in that, we do have an upcoming NRC meeting, which has a site plan submitted for that. I've also emailed the planning division to see with a packet requesting a zoning ZBA special permit amendment for the same reason. Haven't heard back as to whether that package alone gets us in the queue to do something about it or whether there's something else we need to do. Forest Ridge, 78 Forest Ridge is just a non-SHI unit in a condo that dates back to, I don't know how long ago. And it's maybe possible that it could be converted to an SHI unit once the tenant, at any changeover of tenant. I don't know how those guidelines work, but maybe somebody would be interested in pursuing that. 1031 Main Street is one of our federal houses that we repositioned into locally owned units, so it's no longer a federal program. It's locally owned now by Concord Housing Authority's limited liability corporation that we formed to convert those 18 houses. It's on sewer, and it has a garage that could be taken down, and that would open up some land to add a little house sort of a la Commonwealth Avenue. So that could happen. It's just one unit, and we've seen how hard it is for us to build a unit at Commonwealth Avenue. So we would probably go through similar pains building a unit there. But we might be able to just short circuit it and know that we were going to have to directly go to some sort of non-public way of dispersing that development right because public housing is so unaffordable to build. We have another unit on the same program that was transitioned that might be able to have a second floor. That's even more complicated than that one because we'd have to change the septic system. So maybe way in the future on that. If it were worth it, probably not. 15161 Strawberry Hill was deed restricted to 6 units when it happened. It also has an on-site septic system and no ability to connect to sewer. So there's really no potential there. I'm going through these fast. If anybody has any questions about any of them, I'm happy to slow down, but I know there's time limits here. And then 267 to 279 Walden Street near the courthouse has 6 SHI units. There's room on the site for another duplex at the back of the property, but it would have significant driveway access problems. It's not clear how driveway access and parking would be provided in addition to also having a duplex. It's low-lying property. It has some flooding potential. It's have town sewer, same sort of town sewer connection issues as some of the other ones. So that's kind of a recap. It's kind of important to know just because everybody keeps talking about all of the awesome potential of the Concord Housing Authority properties. I just think it's important for everyone to know how restricted each and every one of our properties is to what they are and how difficult it is to overcome that. Any questions?
Thank you. That was great.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Rick. All right. Is there any input from our other? Yes, Diane.
Just a quick question for Rick. Rick, if the sewer system for the Commonwealth Avenue property were resolved, would that also help with the Christopher Heights? In other words, there a confluence in terms of those? I see lots of shaking hands by people who know much more than I do. Okay. Anyway, I'm just curious. It's starting me. Wait, I know how to. This is great. Okay.
Well, the sewer already ends on Commonwealth Avenue out in front of our existing house. So our plan is just to add another connection for this house. It doesn't get it anywhere near the Christopher Heights
Got you. Okay.
It has to be a-
I knew that I understood that from CPC stuff, so that helps me a lot. Thanks, Rick.
I see Heidi has a hand up.
Yeah, as this meeting closes, I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm the owner of the 100 Elmbrook Lane property. And this was slated to be discussed later. I was just wondering if you knew when that happened to be.
Yeah, thanks very much. I appreciate your being here. We have not set what the meeting date would be, but I have set up an administrative meeting with the town manager to try to figure out next steps, and then we'll come back to this this board as necessary. We're aware that there's a 30-day notice requirement, and so we want to make sure that whatever role the trust plays in that we can play and advise the select board in that time frame. So thanks so much for being here today.
Sure. Yeah, I have an active offer on a home, so I'm just hoping it can be discussed soon. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you. All right. Any other things from our housing partners? Any topics that we've been talking about that we didn't get to today? Again, I really appreciate your patience. And as we discussed, priority number one for use of funds, and I know that the trust members would still like to have a discussion, which I don't think we'll get to do today, but mindful that there's a mid-September deadline for community preservation applications this year. We've sort of, in facilitating this discussion, we wanted to make sure that we were all collectively aware of what the housing needs were, and we're identifying what are the priority uses of those projects. Diane, please.
Just a quick comment. I received a note from Stuart Saganor as the chair of the CPC for the coming year that there's going to be an additional amount of funding unanticipated. So there may be a more robust budget there than we thought. So if this is a good opportunity to collect your thoughts and get them to the CPC. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I was pleased to see, it looked like, I don't know if I misread it, 20 million additional dollars going into the state matching funds for.
That's exactly what it said. Keith. How much of that will,
Yeah, how that will the trickle down theories, but
trickle down economics, but I mean.
Well, you know that it's a big number, and there's a lot of money at the state level, and if they started spending it, that
The way they allocate the funds, though, I wouldn't be too optimistic of a real windfall for the town.
I hope you're wrong, Mike, but we'll see. Find out.
I did read something yesterday that said you should expect a similar match to last year.
I read that too, but then I was hoping Stuart's another $20 million might offset that. Well, we'll see.
Yeah,
I like your optimism.
right.
Always optimistic, Linda.
We're a lot of us keeping our eyes on the legislature now, and as things go forward. So that's something we'll all want to watch. Thanks very much. It's my expectation that the trust will have a yet another meeting with the housing groups at some time prior to that September 16th deadline for submission of CVA applications. We'll discuss that later. It's probably, we're going to make sure it's a time that Carrie and Liz can get to, but perhaps sometime during the month of August, especially now where we can do remote meetings and I don't have to leave Island. So thanks.
Yeah, Keith, I think it's important to get that, meeting scheduled if we can, because it's getting a good application to the CPC that is really coordinated with all the housing groups. I think it's really an important task.
Yeah, maybe I can either follow up tomorrow with Carrie or to see about availability. The 4 o'clock on a Wednesday worked for this meeting. And if there's a time that we can do that works for Carrie, that would be great. But why don't I plan to follow up with Carrie and circulate some dates and with Liz and circulate some dates to the membership. Thanks. Next item, housing production plan update. As we've discussed, the steering committee meets next on Wednesday, July 27th at 4 p.m. on Zoom. So we'll hope to see many folks there. Next item, exploring sources of trust funds by way of update. The statewide transfer fee is it's as Rich would say, it isn't dead yet. And the most recent iteration is that there is it's taken the form of an amendment to the economic development bill that I believe the Senate is scheduled to vote on. There are lots of amendments, and that statewide transfer fee is one of them, and is still being considered. So we'll keep an eye on that in the coming days. I think there's 9 days left. Maybe 10 days left in the legislative year.
So Keith, the select board, as did the trust, submitted the amendment for 176, a letter of support for that last week. And I'm sure we'll go ahead and do the same for this new Senate amendment.
Very good. Thanks so much. Yeah, it's helpful we get those LOHA, local organization for housing affordability updates now to let us know how things are going. So that's on the Hill. Thanks very much. Public comment. Anyone who wanted to make a public comment? Thank you for your perseverance and staying with us for this meeting. All right, I'll move on. Future meetings, as I just said, we'll schedule one. I dare say I'll get back to you as soon as we can with dates that work for Carrie and Liz, and mindful of all of the things that we need to do and some of the time deadlines that the town is facing. All
Keith,
right.
Keith,
Yes.
as you explore those dates, if the purpose of the roundtable is really to zero in on make sure we're all coordinated in terms of the CPC application, it may be that as valuable as Carrie's presence is, she may not be needed for that meeting. So just so you know, you have that flex.
Yeah, I guess I defer to Liz. Would we for what we're trying to do is to achieve some consensus, not just reporting out, but maybe achieving consensus on what the group think is of priorities for funding. And if we could tackle that as a housing roundtable, maybe that's a good way to do it, and it would be a matter of what the timing is. So let me put that out there. We don't have to solve that today. We can just be mindful that that's something to think about.
I mean, we could try to schedule, it's really up to basically this group, right? Or the principals here of when that works for everybody. But we usually try to schedule it after Labor Day, right? So that people are more back. I mean, the CPC applications are just very early.
Well, that's why we need to do it before Labor Day, I think.
I just,
yeah,
I mean,
tough.
if that's what you're asking us
Well,
to do
yeah,
a
who do we know
roundtable
on the
before
CPC?
Labor Day, I mean, that,
Who do we know on the CPC we could talk to about that schedule?
Yeah, September 16th is the deadline, my friends.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
That's why we're sweating as we are working on it. So
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, well, I'm gonna report in, I had unexpectedly and yet another opportunity to talk about what Concord's Affordable Housing Trust bylaw is doing, and happened to be at the Reading Select Board meeting last night. A colleague of mine and I were having lunch, and he said we were talking about what they were doing there, and that I had so much to say about Affordable Housing Trust that I was asked to just attend their meeting last night and help their board think about it. And it was, I think it went very well. And there's a lot of lessons learned here that other communities are taking advantage of. So that was great. Thank you. And now, as I previously announced, I've got a Bob Gross talk on transcendentalists and their world that I have to get to in downtown Nantucket in the next few minutes. So we've approached the point where I would invite a motion to adjourn by Mike,
So moved.
and second
Sure, I'll second.
by Linda. All right. So on that motion to adjourn, a roll call vote. Linda,
Aye.
Mike,
I
Rich has already adjourned. Carrie,
muted.
She said aye.
Carrie is aye, and Keith is aye, so that passes 4-0, and it is 5:42. And I want to thank you all for today's meeting.
Thank you.
See you again. All right.
Have fun with Bob tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I've been thinking of hard questions to ask him.
Yeah. Good luck.